My name is Steve King. I'm the Digital Director at Proctor and Stevenson. It really depends on the business requirements, but there are lots of different solutions available, dependent on what initially required from the client. They usually start with a machine translation service, such as Google Translate, which is the classic machine translation service that the majority of people are familiar with. There are lots of other machine translation services available, and you can connect to those services to make use of machine translation and then manual translation by experts, by translation agencies, and building the interfaces for that is available as part of the implementation of a multi-language site. While the machine translation will present the initial translated language, you always really need to enrich that language by localizing it. You need the local expertise to enrich it. What it means is that the language is translated either by a machine translator service or even by a translation agency, but it still needs additional work done by the person who's local and who is the subject matter expert for that business. And they will ensure that the copy is fit for business purpose and culturally sensitive. We have a team here at Proctor who can speak 15 different languages, and we get involved with that whole translation service as well. With the particular machine translation services and translation agencies and translation services, we build interfaces and we use connectors from our content management system and our marketing automation systems to take advantage of the services they provide and to allow the translation service to be used throughout the system. It doesn't really matter what service you do. The fundamental workflow is that the initial copy is created, usually in English or a master language. That is then worked through as a normal creative process, and it's checked and approved. And at that point, then we start the translation process. So with a particular workflow with our content management systems, we will create a version of the English content object and set its language to the target language we want it to be. That object is then using these services, either translated using the machine translation services or the translation agencies. That's one approach, and that's where you get the content stored within the system. And we use that for when we're building systems using Drupal, which is our preferred content management system, or WordPress. We have another approach when we're building websites with another of our preferred solutions called Webflow, where we use a translation service over a top layer, and that sits over the top of the website and will review, based on the URL you type into the address, will review the text and pull in the target language text sitting over the top, and that's managed separately. So there are two different sort of processes there. So at Proctor's, we work with businesses globally, all over the world, and we manage systems. We manage a particular system that has got actually 37 different languages that we serve out as part of that system. And we have developed over the years, with our experience, processes for ensuring that the copy is kept up to date with the alternative languages. So we understand that process, and that process, especially in this instance, we have the English language master and we have the 37 alternative language versions. So if there's a change on that English language master, how we manage that change throughout to the alternative versions, the alternative language versions of that, and the different distributed team who manage the change. So we will build a process where they will review the change and decide whether they want to update their local language, or they send it for translation, or they leave it as it is, because quite often they will rewrite some of the language that, even if it's been translated by a translation agency, to make it fit for their specific business purpose. When you visit a website, especially for some of the larger global companies, they will usually have a language selector on the site, usually near the top or the bottom. And usually it's choosing the different language, a flag. You'll usually get to choose a flag. This will then switch the language to the language that you've selected. Clients quite often will ask us to, rather than forcing the user to choose a language selector, they will want us to present the language in that user's local native language. So how can we make their decision on behalf of the user when they visit a website URL? So there's the obvious one, where you put it in the URL, you have the domain name /language, and it will switch the languages for you. That's the most straightforward way, but that is similar to the language selector. What you can do is check that user's location using something called IP location, and switch the language based on where they're located. That can work, might not work, because it's set by the user's internet protocol address, IP address, and it can be in a different location, even with a different language, to where they actually are, because they're connected to an internet service provider who's providing them that number. So it's difficult. What we prefer and what we recommend is to look at is to check the setting in the user's browser, such as Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. That will have a language setting in it that we can check when they visit the website, and we check the setting there, we check their language setting and say, okay, they're French, we'll show them the French version of the website. When we engage with clients and when we discuss and plan, one of the common pitfalls or the challenges that we discuss with them is when we're discussing about languages, people often get confused between location and language. So quite often we're creating content that we're trying to promote. So it could be an event happening in Paris that we're promoting across Europe. So people quite often think, because the event's in Paris, the language should be French, and they get confused there when the language could be in 20 different, it's the same article, but in 20 different languages. So trying to guide them and advise them on managing that and moving forward with that is something that we're quite used to, we're quite experienced with. One of the other things to just be aware of when you're talking about languages is language variance. So Swiss is a great example of this. So you have Swiss German and you have Swiss French. You also have French and German languages. They're not the same. And sometimes we will have a language layer that is Swiss German, Swiss French, and it will only have small changes, subtle changes between them, but they do exist. And managing that and making sure that we accommodate that is something that we're very used to. Final one I would say is, we discuss with our clients, is the translation process itself. When you create your master language process, usually in English, making sure that gets translated out as quickly as possible. Sometimes that's just not realistic with people's workloads. So we sometimes will build in a failover. So they want the article to go out, they want it to appear on their local site, but because they haven't translated it, we have to show the English version or the master version, whatever that is. And that sometimes can cause confusion because they think it's not ready for translation, or it hasn't been translated at all. It's not passed through the process, which it hasn't, but it does exist in their local site. It's just not been translated into their local language. So they're the sort of standard hurdles that we come across. And we manage all of these things. We've been doing it for a long time, and are very used to all of these different challenges. They can visit the website. They can come visit the website. All the details are on there. They can also email us at marketing@proctors.co.uk.